Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin. I've spent 17 years building a vacation fund. Not a flashy one, but one that meant everything to me. I wasn't stupid, and I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I drove a beat-up Civic, wore the same jeans for years, skipped vacations while my friends posted photos from their tropical getaways. They'd get their parents' help or max out their credit cards. Me, I worked 2 jobs, put every penny I could into an account that said vacation home in big, hopeful letters. When I was 18, I opened the account and my mom co-signed, just in case. I remember her exact words. "This is for your future. Your dream place by the lake." I trusted her completely. Who wouldn't? It was my money, but she was my mom. She'd never let me down, so I never thought to take her off the account. I just let it sit there, safe. Meanwhile, my older brother Brian was always the golden child. He didn't have to work for the things he got. If he wanted a new car, Dad got him one. If he wanted a trip, it just happened. He coasted through life while I built mine one penny at a time. And I was okay with that. Until I wasn't. I guess I never thought Brian would need anything from me. But then again, maybe I didn't really know him at all. The BBQ was like every other, smoke curling into the air, kids running around in the backyard, the sound of the grill sizzling. The usual chatter about work, life, and who's getting married or having babies next. My mom was busy hovering over the food, making sure no one was hungry, as usual. Brian, on the other hand, had this look on his face, like he was about to drop a bomb, and I knew it wasn't going to be good. "So, I've got this idea," Brian said, standing by the grill, flipping a burger like he had the world at his fingertips. I looked up from my plate, eyebrows raised. "What's up?" He took a deep breath, clearly excited. "I'm teaming up with a buddy to buy into a franchise gym. It's this huge opportunity, big returns. We just need a $45,000 investment to get in." I blinked, trying to process. $45,000 for a gym? He nodded like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Yeah, it's a solid deal. We're gonna make bank, Sam, I promise. But here's the thing. We need to come up with the money, like now." My heart skipped a beat. That number hit me hard, because I knew exactly where it was sitting. It was sitting in my vacation fund, the one I'd worked so damn hard to build for 17 years. I tried to stay calm, tried to play it cool. "Have you looked into, traditional funding? A bank loan, maybe?" I knew that wasn't the first thing anyone would consider when they needed quick cash, but it felt like the responsible option. Brian's expression tightened. "Banks don't believe in people like me. You know how it is. They only care about your credit score and mine's. Well, it's not great. But this is a real opportunity. They don't come around often." I opened my mouth to say something else, but my mom, who'd been hovering nearby, chimed in. "Sam, honey, you're young. You'll rebuild your fund later. It's a family investment. You can help out, right?" I looked between them, the tightness in my chest growing. Mom wasn't even looking at me. She was staring at Brian like he was some kind of investment guru, not my older brother who'd coasted through life on other people's dime. She was selling me on this, and that stung more than anything. Brian gave me a smile that was supposed to be reassuring. "I know it's a lot, but think about it. You've got it sitting there, just waiting to be used, and I'm your brother. This is a chance for me to really make something of myself. We both could be set for life." I could feel the pressure building in my head, the way it always did when people tried to tell me what was best for me, but it wasn't about what was best for me, was it? It was about what was easiest for them. I stood there for a second, weighing my options. I didn't want to make waves at a family BBQ, but it wasn't like I hadn't made sacrifices already. All those years of not buying things I wanted, of scraping by, only to have my mom and brother waltz in like I was sitting on a gold mine to make it easier for them. I cleared my throat, trying to steady myself. "I don't know, Brian. It's a lot. You're asking for a lot." Mom cut in again, a little too fast. "Sam, sweetie, think of it as helping the family. You can always rebuild. You'll be okay." Rebuild. Was that how she saw it? Just a little hiccup. Like I hadn't spent nearly 2 decades living frugally, watching every cent, every penny. That wasn't just money to me. It was the one thing I'd built. My future. And now it felt like it was being drained for something that wasn't even my dream. But I said nothing. I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down, and I didn't want to be the bad guy at the family BBQ, so I nodded. Just a little, like I was agreeing, but not really agreeing at all. My fingers clenched around my plate, and the moment felt like it stretched forever. But the right words, never came. Okay, I said finally, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. I'll think about it. Brian grinned, but I saw the greed underneath it, barely hidden. Mom smiled, like this was already settled. And me. I just stood there, my stomach churning, wishing I hadn't said a damn thing. I had barely made it through the rest of the BBQ when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. Just wired the funds to help Brian. You'll be so proud. My stomach dropped, and I felt like I couldn't breathe for a second. I was still standing by the grill, a half-eaten hot dog in my hand, but I suddenly couldn't taste it. My mind raced, panic gripping me as the message bounced around in my head. My account, my future, had just been drained. Just like that. I excused myself from the table, trying to hold it together. My legs felt like they were moving on their own as I stepped out of the backyard, finding some space where no one could see me crumble. I pulled out my phone and called the bank, my hands shaking as the call connected. Hi, I need to check the balance on my savings account, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The silence on the other end dragged on for what felt like hours. Finally, the banker came back. Your current balance is $6,500. I could barely hear her through the ringing in my ears. Wait, what was the balance before? Before. It was just over $45,000. There was a large transfer this morning. I felt like the ground had dropped out from under me. A transfer. From my account. Yes, ma'am. A wire transfer. I hung up and tried to breathe. My vision blurred, and for a second, I thought I might throw up. I walked back inside, my mind a hurricane of thoughts. I had to make a choice. Do I confront my mom right now, or keep it together? I texted her, and within a minute, my phone lit up with her reply. Sam, honey, I knew you'd come around eventually. We're doing the right thing. I couldn't wait anymore. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands tight with fury. I dialed her number. Hey, Mom, I said, my voice flat, but I couldn't hide the edge that was slipping in. What the hell did you do? She answered like it was nothing out of the ordinary, her voice too cheerful, too light. Oh, I just helped Brian out with the money. I knew you'd come around. It's a good decision for all of us. I could feel my jaw tighten. You used my money. Without asking, without telling me. Her voice softened, but there was no apology. It's not theft, Sam. It's a family decision. You'll rebuild it in time, honey. It's for the greater good. We all need to chip in. The words felt like a slap. The greater good. I repeated, my throat tight. I've been working for 17 years to build that fund, Mom. That was my future, my plan, and you just gave it away. There was a long silence on the other end. My mom was never good at admitting when she was wrong. She sighed, like I was being dramatic. I'm sorry you feel that way, but it wasn't like I took it for myself. It's for Brian's future. And you're still young. You can rebuild. I felt my hands tremble as I gripped the phone. It was all happening so fast, so completely, that I couldn't process it all at once. That money wasn't for me to just rebuild. It was mine, to keep, to protect. And now it's gone. Gone because you decided I should give it to Brian. Mom's voice softened again, but I didn't care. It's done, Sam. You'll see, in the long run, this will all work out. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her how much she'd just shattered everything I'd worked for, how her family decision felt like a betrayal, but all I said was, I have to go. I ended the call before she could say anything else. I stood there for a minute, just breathing, trying to stop my mind from spinning. The anger wasn't hitting yet, not really, just a kind of hollow, cold shock. I couldn't believe she'd done it. She knew how hard I'd worked, how much that money meant to me, but somehow it didn't matter. The money was gone, and no amount of yelling or crying was going to bring it back. I didn't go back inside right away. Instead, I stood there for a moment longer, looking at the yard. The laughter and chatter from the family party felt so far away, like I was standing in some kind of fog. It wasn't about the money, not anymore. It was about the trust I thought I had, and the trust they'd just thrown out the window. But I didn't make a scene. I didn't say anything. I told myself that it wasn't worth starting a war over money that was already gone. The fight was over before it even began. The next few days were a blur, but one thing stood out: Brian's Instagram. It was flooded with shiny, polished pictures of his gym, renovated interiors, new equipment, sleek branding. Everything screamed success, even though I knew it wasn't even close to being finished, but that didn't matter. The gym looked like it was already raking in cash, and I was standing there with nothing. Nothing but a dry ache in my chest every time I saw another post about how great things were going. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't escape the thought that I'd just given him everything I'd spent 17 years working for, and I was watching him turn it into something I had no part in. He was living his dream, and I was, what? Left to pick up the pieces of my own. I didn't want to think about it anymore. I didn't want to feel angry. I wanted control over something, anything. That's when I realized I had to do something. I had to move forward somehow. Jake had been hinting for weeks about getting serious, asking me about our future, but I couldn't stop thinking about my empty savings account. He didn't know about the fund, not really. And the last thing I wanted was to have him think I was irresponsible, or worse, that I'd let something like this ruin us before it even started. But I had to deal with this, right? I had to do something to make it feel like my life wasn't spinning out of control. So I booked an appointment at a mortgage office, just to see. No harm in it, just to check. The appointment wasn't anything fancy, just a small office, a big desk, and a guy who wore too much cologne. He was friendly enough, asked me about my job, what I was looking for. I didn't even know. I told him I wanted to look at buying a home someday, maybe in the next few years. He punched some numbers into his computer, and the words he said next stopped me cold. Based on your income and credit, you're eligible for a loan over $2 million. My mind blanked. I almost laughed like it was a joke, but it wasn't. He kept talking, running through the options, but I couldn't hear him anymore. My thoughts were swirling. $2 million. I was eligible for that. The room felt small suddenly, suffocating. I had no idea. No clue that my credit was perfect, that I had that kind of buying power. All this time, I'd been putting my money into that stupid vacation fund, thinking it was the key to everything. But this was power, real power, and I didn't even know it. I swallowed hard, trying to get my bearings. I'd worked 2 jobs for years, lived frugally, said no to things that other people took for granted. And now I was sitting here, hearing that I could get a loan for more money than I'd ever thought about in my life. It was like a whole new world was opening up, and I was just stunned. I tried to focus, but the numbers were still swimming in front of my eyes. I was eligible. Eligible for what? For what? A life I hadn't imagined, maybe. A house, a future, a world where money wasn't something I had to chase. I hadn't even known I had this kind of quiet financial power. The guy kept talking, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was picturing myself in a house, a real house, with a kitchen that was mine, a yard I could call my own. It was a dizzying thought, and for a second, I almost felt like I could reach out and touch it, touch everything I wanted, everything I deserved. When the meeting was over, I stood up, still processing everything he'd said. I'd never felt so shaken in my life. The contrast between the gym Brian was building, his polished vision of success, and this new path in front of me felt like a sharp line drawn between us. I was always going to be stuck in his shadow, wasn't I? But now I had choices. I could carve my own path, one I could control, but that didn't stop the sting of what had happened. My fund was gone, and nothing was going to bring it back. But I had this. I had power. Even if I didn't know what to do with it just yet, I had it. And somehow, that made the sting a little easier to bear. The family brunch felt like a slow-motion train wreck. The house was filled with the usual chatter and clinking of silverware, but everything felt muffled to me. Brian was sitting across the table from me, looking smug as always. He was talking about the gym, like he was some kind of CEO, all polished and smooth. Progress is slow but promising, he said, taking a bite of eggs. We're really getting the word out, and we've got some good leads on memberships. I nodded, barely listening. I could feel the pressure building in my chest, the familiar tightness that came whenever I had to hear about his success without saying anything. There was no mention of repayment, no mention of the money Mom had wired. Nothing about how he was going to make it right. Nothing about how my money had helped him get there. I wanted to scream, but instead I just chewed my food and swallowed it down, both literally and figuratively. What was the point of making a scene? The money was gone. What was I going to do? Yell at him in front of everyone? I stayed quiet. The whole time, I stayed quiet. After brunch, Jake and I were standing in the front yard, getting ready to head home. He had that look on his face, the one where you could tell he was about to say something big. I knew it was coming. The "let's talk about the future" talk, the one that had been looming over us for the past few weeks. He didn't beat around the bush. How about we go look at some open houses this afternoon? Just for fun, he suggested, holding up his car keys like it was the most casual thing in the world. I hesitated, suddenly overwhelmed. Part of me wanted to scream at him, tell him everything that had happened, tell him how Brian had taken my money and how my mom had let him. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded. Sure, let's do it. We drove to a few places, nothing too fancy, just some older homes with a little potential. But when we pulled up to this one house, this massive farmhouse that looked like something out of a dream, I couldn't help but stop. It was exactly what I wanted. Open spaces, wide windows, a view of the countryside. It was stunning, but it felt so far out of reach. Jake was already getting out of the car, his excitement contagious. This place is incredible. Could you imagine us living here? I didn't know what came over me, but before I could stop myself, I reached into my purse and pulled out a piece of paper. It was the pre-approval letter from the mortgage office, the one that said I could afford this place. I handed it to him without saying a word. Jake looked at it, his brow furrowing in confusion. Then his eyes widened, and his voice dropped to a whisper. Wait, what is this? It's a pre-approval for a mortgage, I said, my voice barely above a breath. I can afford this. We can afford this. Jake stared at the paper, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to pure, wide-eyed excitement. Are you serious? I nodded, a small smile creeping onto my face despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. Yeah, I didn't know it until recently, but I'm eligible for over $2 million. So, yeah, we could buy this. He blinked, still processing it. Then his grin broke through, bright and huge. Holy shit, this is real, Sam. We can actually do this. I could see it all unfolding in front of me, us, in that house, with a life I never thought I could have. The thought was overwhelming, and yet I felt this strange calm wash over me. I could take control again. I could have something of my own. I didn't need anyone's help to make it happen. Jake started talking about how we could move in and when we could start making offers, but I tuned him out for a second. My mind was racing. I had worked my ass off for years, put every penny into that account, thinking it would give me something, give me a future. But that future didn't have to look like what I thought it would. It didn't have to be built on someone else's terms. By the time Jake and I were back in the car, I was already pulling up the realtor's contact information. I'm putting in an offer, I said, the words coming out like they were already set in stone. Jake looked at me, a mix of shock and excitement in his eyes. Today, I nodded. Yeah, today. I didn't wait. As soon as we got home, I called the realtor, and within a few hours, the offer was in. By that night, I had the email in my inbox. Accepted. The farmhouse was ours. And as I sat there, staring at the confirmation, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. It wasn't the dream I'd had when I was 18, but it was something real, something I could hold on to, something I had earned. It was the next weekend when I dropped the bomb. We were sitting around the dinner table, me, Jake, Mom, Dad, and Brian. Mom had made her usual casserole, the one everyone pretended to like, but I wasn't really paying attention. The whole thing felt like an ordinary Sunday dinner, except that it wasn't. Not anymore. I couldn't pretend anymore. Couldn't keep the secret any longer. So, I said, leaning back in my chair, trying to sound casual, though I knew my voice was a little too tight, a little too controlled. We're closing on the farmhouse in 3 weeks. The fork Brian had been holding dropped to his plate with a soft clink. He looked up at me, then at Jake, like he couldn't quite process what I'd just said. I could see Mom's face freeze, her eyes wide with confusion. Dad was quiet, like he always was during these kinds of moments, but I could feel his attention shifting toward me. Wait, what farmhouse? Brian asked, his voice almost too quiet, like he wasn't sure if he wanted to know. I didn't flinch. The one we toured last weekend. We made an offer, and it was accepted. We're moving forward with it. For a moment, there was just silence. Then Mom leaned forward, her hands shaking slightly as she set her glass down. But you gave everything to Brian. How can you afford this? Her voice was sharp, edged with something between panic and disbelief. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. I wasn't going to get defensive. This wasn't about the money anymore, not really. That was a vacation fund, Mom. It wasn't my only money. Brian's face twisted, a quick flash of guilt and confusion. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out at first. I could feel his embarrassment radiating across the table. I I didn't know, he stammered. I'm not upset about the money, I said calmly, staring directly at him. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't going to yell, but I was making sure my words landed. I'm upset you didn't ask. It was quiet for a beat. Too quiet. Mom looked like she was trying to piece things together, but she was struggling. What do you mean, I didn't ask? Sam, we're family? This was for Brian's future. We? No, Mom, I interrupted, keeping my voice steady. That money wasn't for Brian. It wasn't for anyone but me. You didn't ask. You just took. Her eyes flashed, and I could see the panic setting in. She was processing the weight of it all now. But you're okay, right? You said you could rebuild it. I shook my head, trying to keep my frustration under control. It's not about rebuilding. It's about respecting what I've worked for. You didn't give me the choice. You decided what was best for me, without ever asking. Brian shifted uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding my gaze. I didn't think it would be a big deal. No. I cut him off again, my voice sharper now, but not angry, just firm. You don't get to decide what's best for me, Brian. You don't get to take money from me because you think I can just rebuild. That wasn't your decision to make. Mom opened her mouth like she was going to argue, but then she closed it again, staring down at the table. Dad was still silent, but I could feel his eyes on me. I didn't need his approval, not right now, but I could tell this was hitting harder than I'd expected. I wasn't here to make them feel guilty. I wasn't even sure if I cared whether they felt guilty at all. I was here to draw a line in the sand, to show them where my boundaries were. I stood up from the table, feeling this strange calm settle over me. I've been living my life by everyone else's rules for so long, and I'm done with that. I worked for what I had, and I know what I'm doing now. No one gets to take that away from me, not without asking. I could hear the shuffle of chairs behind me as I grabbed my plate and started walking toward the kitchen. Sam, wait. Brian's voice was quieter now, almost pleading, but I didn't turn back. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. I had said what I needed to say. I had drawn the line. Mom and Brian could process it however they needed to, but I wasn't going to explain myself anymore. I wasn't going to be the one they could push around. Not anymore. I rinsed my plate in the sink, feeling the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't holding my breath. I was done holding my breath. Now, it was their turn to catch up. It was late when I pulled into my driveway, the headlights from my car casting long shadows on the pavement. The night felt heavy, thick with the words I'd said earlier, but the silence after was worse than anything. I'd said my piece, but I knew this wasn't over. I was getting out of the car when I saw her. Mom's car was parked at the end of the driveway, blocking me from the garage. She was standing by her car, waiting for me. The sight of her there, just standing in the cold, hit me harder than I expected. My heart did this weird twist. I wanted to avoid this, wanted to avoid her, but I couldn't keep pretending it was fine when it wasn't. Sam, she called, her voice shaking. I could hear the strain in it from the porch. Can we talk? I felt my chest tighten. What now? She took a slow breath, like she was trying to steady herself. Please, just give me a minute. I didn't answer right away. I could feel my anger bubbling up again, but I pushed it down. It wasn't the time for yelling, not now. I walked over to where she was standing, her hands clutching the sides of her jacket, and she looked small, like the weight of the conversation had crushed her. I don't get it, Mom, I said, keeping my voice steady. Why didn't you just ask me? Why didn't you ask before you drained my account? She didn't look at me right away, her eyes cast down. I thought you would say no. I thought you didn't have anything left. I thought you were struggling. The words stung, sharper than I'd expected. I swallowed hard. Did you ever think to verify that before you took it? I asked, trying not to let the frustration seep into my tone. You assumed I was broke, that I couldn't handle it, but you never asked me. She looked up at me then, her face crumpling like I'd just slapped her. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't think you'd have a problem with it. You were working so hard, I thought you'd be glad to help Brian. I thought you'd want to help him succeed. I'm not mad that you helped him, I said, feeling that knot in my stomach twist again. I'm mad that you never thought to ask me first. It was my money, Mom, my future. I let the words hang in the air, thick and heavy. You don't just take something from someone like that. You don't get to make decisions for me without even asking what I think. Her shoulders sagged, and I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. I didn't feel bad. Not anymore. I thought you'd understand, she said, voice breaking. I thought you'd want to help him. I shook my head, trying to clear the weight in my chest. I do want to help him. But not like this. Not at the expense of my dreams, my future. It's not just about the money, Mom. It's about trust. You broke that, and you didn't even give me the chance to decide for myself. I could see her breaking in front of me, and it almost made me feel guilty. Almost. But then I remembered how I felt the day I called the bank. The panic, the disbelief, the helplessness, that wasn't something I could just sweep away. Sam, please, she whispered, and there was this desperation in her voice, the kind of desperation you can't ignore. I never meant for it to be like this. I didn't mean to make you feel this way. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought you'd understand. I looked at her, feeling the sharp sting of everything I'd been holding inside. I understand more than you think, but you never asked me, and that's the problem. There was a long silence between us. The night was still, and the only sound was the soft rustling of the trees in the wind. I exhaled slowly, my breath coming out shaky, but I held my ground. You want to help me, Mom? Ask first. Don't just take what doesn't belong to you. Her face crumpled even further, and I could see the guilt washing over her. I'm sorry, Sam. I'm sorry I didn't ask. I thought I knew what was best for you. I crossed my arms, standing firm. That's the thing. You didn't know what was best for me. You assumed. She didn't say anything after that, just stood there, her face pale, her breath shallow. I wasn't sure if she was waiting for me to comfort her or if she was just trying to process everything I said. But I wasn't going to be the one to make her feel better tonight, not this time. I turned to walk away, the weight of the conversation still heavy in my chest. Next time you ask before taking anything from me. And with that, I got into my car and drove away. It wasn't the closure I'd expected, but it was enough. Brian's texts were relentless. For days, my phone buzzed with them. Endless messages that ranged from apologetic to pleading. He wanted to meet. He needed to talk. At first, I ignored them. I wasn't ready for that conversation, not yet. But then one morning, after a particularly long string of texts, I finally caved. I could feel the weight of it all pressing down on me. It wasn't going to go away until we talked. I agreed to meet him at the cafe down the street from my place, the one we used to go to when things were easier. When I walked in, Brian was already sitting at a corner booth, staring at the table like he was waiting for something to happen. He looked small, not the confident, charismatic guy I was used to seeing. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes a little red, like he hadn't been sleeping. I slid into the seat across from him without saying anything, waiting for him to start. Sam, He took a deep breath, his hands rubbing his face. I'm sorry. I should have never. He broke off like he couldn't even finish the sentence. I raised a hand, cutting him off. You don't need to keep apologizing, Brian. Just talk. He looked at me for a long moment before he spoke again, his voice low. The gym's barely breaking even. I don't know how to make this work. I thought it was going to be easier, you know. I thought we'd be making money by now, but it's slow. Real slow. I nodded, trying not to let the anger creep up again. I'd heard this before. And the repayment plan? He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Look, the Christmas thing, that was a pipe dream. I was just trying to make it sound better than it is. It's going to take years, Sam. I don't know how long it'll be before I can pay you back. I want to, I really do, but I can't promise anything. I felt this strange calm wash over me. I had already known this was coming, hadn't I? I'd known he didn't have the money. That's why I didn't push for repayment in the first place. Brian, I said, my voice steady, the money's not the issue. He looked up at me, confused. Then what is? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions from slipping out. The issue is trust. You didn't ask me. You took what didn't belong to you. You acted like you knew what was best for me, for us, without even talking to me. He looked away, guilt flooding his face. I didn't mean to hurt you, Sam. I just thought I needed to get this done, to make something of myself. But I get it. I screwed up. I didn't want to dwell on the past, though. That wasn't going to get us anywhere. Look, I'm not mad about the money anymore, I said, leaning forward a little. I've mentally written it off. It's gone. What I'm worried about is how we move forward from here. Brian stared at me, still processing what I was saying. But I don't want you to think I'm not going to pay you back. I nodded, trying to ease the tension. I know you want to, but you've got to stop letting guilt eat you alive, Brian. Guilt's not going to help either of us. You need to focus on getting your gym back on track, not on how you're going to repay me. His eyes flickered with something like relief, like the weight of his mistakes had finally been acknowledged without me holding it over him. He let out a long breath. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but thanks. I guess I just needed to hear that. I studied him for a moment. There was no anger in me anymore, not for him. It was just done. I didn't need him to fix it. I just needed him to understand. I'm not doing this for you, Brian. I'm doing it for me, I said. And I'm doing it because I'm not going to carry that weight around forever. But if you want to rebuild our relationship, if you want me to trust you again, then you've got to prove it. No more assuming, no more taking. You ask, you communicate. His face softened, and for the first time in weeks, he seemed to really listen. I hear you, Sam. I do. And I'm going to work on it. I don't know how, but I'll make it right. I leaned back in my seat, a small sigh escaping me. I had said what I needed to say. I had drawn the line. The ball was in his court now. I don't need you to make it right, Brian, I said quietly. I just need you to be honest with me. That's it. He nodded, almost gratefully, like I'd given him a lifeline. As we sat there, the tension between us started to ease, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on equal footing again. Not because everything was fixed, but because we were finally speaking the same language, respect. And that was a start. The conversation about money hadn't come up much in the past, at least not seriously. Money had always been this unspoken thing in my family, a quiet undercurrent that no one really addressed. But after that talk with Brian, something shifted. It started slowly, like a crack forming in a wall. We were sitting around the dinner table one night, the usual hum of family chatter filling the space, when Dad broke the silence. So, Sam, he said, eyeing me over his plate of meatloaf, I've been thinking, with everything that's been going on, maybe you could help me out with some of the retirement stuff. I mean, I know you're doing well, and you know more about this stuff than I do. It wasn't a big ask, but it was a huge moment. Dad had never, not once, asked for help with anything financial. In fact, he'd always been the one giving advice, not taking it. I put down my fork and looked at him, surprised. You want me to help with your retirement funds? I asked, trying not to sound too amazed. Yeah, he said, rubbing his hand over his face. I don't really understand all the options, and, well, I could use some guidance. I leaned back in my chair, letting the request sink in. It wasn't just about him needing help. It was about him finally seeing that I wasn't the kid who couldn't handle her finances anymore. I had earned this. I had learned how to manage money through trial and error, a hell of a lot of research, and living well below my means. Sure, I said, my voice calm, but there was a small thrill running through me. I'd be happy to help. It's not as complicated as it sounds, but it's all about starting with small choices. Little decisions add up, you know. Brian, who had been mostly quiet, nodded along, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. I don't get it, though, he said, leaning in. How do you have the kind of money to help with Dad's retirement stuff, but also save for a house and, live your life? I've been working my ass off with the gym, but I'm barely scraping by. I studied him for a second. He didn't seem embarrassed anymore, more like genuinely curious, like he was seeing me in a new light. It's not about working harder, Brian. It's about working smarter, I said, keeping my voice even. I've been careful with how I spend. I don't buy the latest gadgets or eat out every week. I put a little bit away every month, even when it seemed like I didn't have much. The magic is in compounding. That's where the real growth happens. He blinked, like I'd just opened a whole new world to him. Compounding. Yeah, I said, leaning forward a little, excited to explain it. It's when your money earns interest on the interest. You don't just earn on what you put in, you earn on what's already been earned. Over time, it grows exponentially. It's the long game, Brian. His eyes widened. And you've been doing this for how long? 17 years, I said, almost laughing at how strange that sounded. It doesn't happen overnight. You just need to be patient. I could see him processing it, the numbers clicking in his head, but what struck me more was that he wasn't dismissing it. He wasn't brushing me off the way he might have a year ago. He was actually listening. Maybe I've been doing this all wrong, he muttered to himself, but I caught the edge of disbelief in his voice. I smiled, a little proud but trying not to show it. It's not about right or wrong. It's about making better decisions. Small steps, and eventually, you're in a much better place than you think. Mom, who had been quietly listening, spoke up then, her voice softer than usual. I never really understood all this. I just figured it was about getting by, making it work. I met her eyes. It's not just about getting by. It's about choosing to live a certain way. It's about living below your means, so you don't have to worry about the unexpected. If you can make a few sacrifices, it makes everything easier down the road. Mom looked at me like she was hearing it for the first time, like the fog was finally lifting. I guess I've always just thought about surviving, not really thriving. I nodded, the conversation sinking in. This was the shift, the beginning of something I hadn't expected. Financial transparency wasn't just about numbers. It was about trust, about seeing my family in a new light, as people who could understand, who could learn alongside me. Brian's phone buzzed, and he glanced down. Hey, I sent a payment. It's not much, but I'm starting to pay you back, a little every month. Mom glanced over at him, and I could see the silent approval in her eyes, though she didn't say anything. For the first time, it wasn't about guilt or shame. It was about action. And it felt good. Thanks, Brian, I said genuinely. It's a start. Dad, who had been silent for a while, finally spoke up again. Maybe we should all sit down sometime and go over this, Sam. I'm starting to see how important it is to plan, not just for retirement, but for everything. Absolutely, I said. We can do it. As I looked around the table, I realized something had shifted. The money talk wasn't taboo anymore. It wasn't some silent rift we all pretended didn't exist. It was open, honest, and for once there was room for everyone to understand. And that felt like the real win. It had been 18 months since everything changed. The farmhouse we'd bought was now home, our home. The garden was lush with flowers I'd never thought I'd have time to tend to, but now, in this life I'd built, I found a strange joy in it. Jake and I stood at the altar in that garden on our wedding day, surrounded by family and friends. It wasn't anything extravagant, just exactly what I'd wanted. Small, simple, and real. There were no grand gestures, no over-the-top expectations. I had no illusions about needing some fairy tale wedding. At 18, I thought I needed that. I thought I needed the perfect day, the big celebration. But now, I knew better. What mattered wasn't the show, it was the love, the connection, the quiet understanding between two people who had worked for their future, not just dreamed about it. Brian was there, of course, standing with my mom. He looked different, less like the man I'd once seen as the golden child, and more like someone who had worked hard to get where he was. The gym, which had barely scraped by when I first saw it, was now profitable. Brian had repaid every single dollar I'd lent him, with interest. And more importantly, he asked before making any financial decisions. He'd learned that much, at least. There was a quiet pride in him, not from the money or the success, but from the respect he'd earned, the respect he had finally started to show me. I caught him looking at me during the ceremony, a soft smile on his face. And in that moment, I realized we were finally on the same page. We weren't just siblings who'd been caught in a financial mess. We were equals. Jake squeezed my hand, pulling me out of my thoughts, and I looked up at him, the love and excitement in his eyes matching mine. There had been times, early on, when I doubted this would ever happen, when I wondered if I could ever trust again, if I'd ever let go of the things that had held me back. But standing here now, everything felt right. We'd built something together, not just a house, but a life. When the ceremony ended, we mingled with family and friends, the air warm with laughter and conversation. Brian came over, his hands in his pockets. "You did good, Sam," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "I'm proud of you." I smiled, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "Thanks, Brian. I'm proud of you too." I didn't need anything from him anymore. I didn't need repayment or to prove anything. We had both learned that what mattered was respect. That was worth more than any amount of money. Later, as the sun set and Jake and I stood together on the porch, looking out over the land, I felt the peace I'd been searching for. The vacation fund I'd worked so hard for was long gone, but in its place was something better. Control, boundaries, respect. The lesson wasn't about the wealth I'd lost. It was about choosing generosity over being used. I hadn't just gained a house or a new life. I'd gained the confidence to stand firm, to draw lines when I needed to, and to trust myself to make the right choices. And now, standing in this life I'd built, I knew for certain that I had everything I needed.